Frank Klose, kind enough to join us for a couple moments talking a little Phils, and of course Sports Talk Philly and our 97.3 ESPN Phillies Insider. How you been, pal?
I'm well. How about yourself?
I'm doing well, and appreciate you always jumping on board. So the Phils don't look now. A little brief 2-game winning streak, 3 out of their last 4. You know, I'm curious to get your thought. Were you surprised that Pete Mackanin said the other day that he believes the team's going to make a move or two? Is that surprising to hear come out of the manager's mouth?
I think it's something that everybody just kind of knows. Pat Neshek fully expects to be traded. I'm sure Jeremy Hellickson believes he could be out the door as well. I mean, there's not a lot of starting pitchers available, so it seems pretty clear that there's going to be a couple moves at the very least, and maybe something with Tommy Joseph as well.
Okay, so I know he mentioned the other day that, listen, you know, if you want to call up players, right, then you do your due diligence. We know about their prospects. We know about their prospects going forward. And you talk about a player in Hoskins, and then he mentioned, well, you know, if you want to call him up, you got to move someone. And in that place, you know, you're talking about potentially moving Tommy Joseph. What are you hearing about Joseph, and what do you think? Where would potentially be one of his landing spots?
You know, I haven't really heard much at all about Tommy Joseph. I think that a potential landing spot was the Athletics, but they just added right-handed first baseman Chris Carter. You know, they probably were going to move Yonder Alonso, who's a left-handed bat, but I think they brought in Chris Carter to, you know, the Athletics have a left-handed first baseman in AAA who they might platoon. I don't think they see him as an everyday player, but he could be the left hand of a platoon, and Joseph could have worked. Now, the Athletics still could work out if they figure that Joseph is better than Chris Carter, and I think Tommy Joseph is better than Chris Carter, and, you know, he's signed for many more years to come. So I think Joseph really profiles as an Athletics-type player, the type of player he is, and how they might use him, you know, with a first base DH kind of split. But really, there's really no natural fits. You know, there's one possibility left. You know, the Yankees haven't really. We really got to look at what the Yankees do, because they acquired Frazier from the White Sox, and you thought maybe they'd throw him at first. But one option that's discussed a little bit is that Frazier is the Yankees' third baseman, and Chase Headley, who has not been doing very well as an everyday player, could platoon with a right-handed bat at first base. So that remains one possibility. I don't think that there's a lot that the Phillies could get in return, because the demand for a player like Joseph is low. But he's somebody who could potentially find a fit. And those are the two teams I can come up with right now. And then anybody else that might be a match might be next off season when, you know, the Royals lose Eric Hosmer to free agency and they need a bat. So there's still those are the two landing spots which I tend to think have the best chance, but I don't know that the chance is that strong either.
Well, two things with the Yankees, with the acquisition of Frazier and the two relievers. Headley is actually going to move the first. He struggled against left-handed hitters, but Frazier's going to be their everyday third baseman. I actually think you can. I think you dismiss the Yankees in that regard.
I would. Well, actually, I mean, Joseph hits best against left-handed pitching. So, you know, he and Headley then, if that is, I actually hadn't heard that update yet. I think then, yeah, that could be, Joseph could be the right-handed part of a platoon if the Yankees are willing to go that route. But,
I'm wondering.
I'm glad to hear though that Frazier's a third.
Yeah. I mean, you got to stick him in every day, and you got to give him at bats too, because like I said, in that ballpark with that stadium and that porch, he should be able to hit another 16 home runs. You know, when you look at Joseph, is it a question of he's not really an everyday first baseman? They're not. That's not really the route they want to go. I understand he's a little older. He's 26, but it's like the whole Franco. It seems as though maybe there was an over evaluation, or maybe people right away were trying to look for someone to replace Ryan Howard. And you know, here are two guys that came up in their mid-20s. Howard did it. Had to wait for Tomei to step aside. They get rid of Howard. Now you can throw Tommy in there. It just seems as though, I don't want to say they're giving up, or he's just not the answer at first.
Well, I think last year Joseph was in the ideal situation. He was the right-handed part of a platoon with Ryan Howard, and the two of them combined for the most home runs at first base of any team in baseball. So that was a nice little pairing. I tend to think, after watching him play for most of the season, that that's going to be Tommy Joseph's best possible outcome, is that he is the right-handed part of a platoon. I think he's shown he can hit lefties very, very well. I think he's shown he struggles a little bit against righties, and you know what? I don't think they overevaluated him, but I think this year they went into the season saying, "Hey, you did great as the right-handed part of a platoon. Can you play every day?" And I think what we're kind of seeing is, I don't think that a team would be in really bad shape if they ended up having to start him every day. But I think his strongest place on a major league roster is the right-hand part of a platoon.
All right, the million-dollar question, I think, for a lot of those in the audience is it's easy to say the generic question, right? When are they going to start bringing up some of these prospects and calling up some of these prospects? And, you've got young players. We know that. Sixto Sanchez, he's only 18 years old. He's ridiculous good. So they've got a bunch of prospects. The issue is, I think the organization right now, the direction of the franchise, I think they're having this internal battle, Frank, where, okay, are we going to admit full-blown rebuild? Are we going to try to go after a Stanton, a Yelich, maybe a Machado, or a Harper down the road? And if so, we know we have to part ways with some of these prospects that we covered. So it's almost like a damned if you do, damned if you don't. So do you think there's this internal discussion going on of, okay, what are we going to do? Are we going to eventually give some of these guys September call-ups? Or are we just going to ride it out with the guys we have and then in the offseason just strip it down and then build it back up?
I tend to think they want to ride it out until the trade deadline and they kind of see who they can move. Howie Kendrick is going to come back probably. I think we'll see Howie Kendrick by Monday back with the Phillies. That's not a lot of time to showcase himself for a trade, but he's the type of player with a salary that could be traded in August. If Joseph moves, it opens up space, but I don't think they're really – they don't feel forced to bring anybody up. Now, when we spoke a few weeks ago, I said I think they're forced to bring up Nick Williams at this point, having lost those positions. So I think that's kind of what they're waiting for. I don't think there's a sense of urgency at the moment to bring anybody along. And I think, too, there's to a certain extent, if you bring up somebody and then they fail, then you might damage their development a little bit. Aside from Hoskins, though, there's really nobody that's really kind of knocking on the door saying, "Hey, let me in." So I think that they're in a position where they don't have to rush anybody, and they can sort of let this sort of organically work out. Now, it just so happens, I think I mentioned either with you or Mike, I can't remember, that if Hernandez and Kendrick come back, then Williams might be squeezed if he's not playing well. Well, guess what? He's basically making a statement, "Hey, I'm here to stay, period." And, with the Altair injury, he's got a starting job probably for the rest of the way because Kendrick will be probably moved before then, but later. So I think that they're just going to kind of let this work itself out in the interim. And the only one that I would really say is could come up right away would be Rhys Hoskins, but even then he's kind of struggling in July.
So, yeah, but this is where I disagree with you a little bit. I'm not saying you have to go out and right away and you're not bringing up a Sanchez, right? We know that. I mean, these guys got to make their way through AAA. Okay, but you look at Roman Quinn. If the kid was healthy, I don't see why you want to call him up. The problem is he's on the DL, so that's one thing. But how about Alfaro?
Right.
I mean, again,
Alfaro will be up. He will be up in September at the latest. That's for sure. And as you brought up before, he's out of minor league options. So I think when he comes up, he's up for good. So I think they kind of know that. So I think they have a few things they want him to work on defensively more than anything down at AAA. So while he's doing that, they have Andrew Knapp getting a look, which I think is good. I think Knapp has shown he's a major league player. Not necessarily a starter. I think that remains to be seen. But I think that you could feel comfortable if you have Knapp and Alfaro. And basically, when the rosters expand, you're going to see Alfaro for sure, and he probably will be around next year as well. So yeah, Quinn would be up, and this is really unfortunate for his career because guess what? They have a lot of outfielders.
That's the thing.
You know what? If you're the Phillies, all right. So if let's say Howie Kendrick was not back, you might see some Dilton Cousins, but Kendrick's on his way back, and then maybe if Kendrick's traded, Altair's still out, you might see a Cousins, but really there's nobody like banging down the door. That's the reason why we're not seeing them, and I know people often say, well, let's bring them up and see what we can do, but I've also heard those same people sometimes when a prospect comes up and struggles a little bit, they say,
you
hey,
rushed
send him
him
down.
Yeah, no, you know what, you're that's a fair assessment, and I've been guilty of that sometimes, because you're right. It's almost like, well, fire the head coach or fire the manager. Well, who are you going to replace him with? Right away it's a knee-jerk reaction. I just think you want to try to whet the appetite of the fans a little bit if you're raving about some of these prospects, and I do think 2 to 3, as we mentioned, should probably get that September call-up. With that being said, in the trade deadline right around the corner, is there any realistic shot here that the Phillies entertain the thought of maybe going after a Yelich or Stanton? And if so, what would they have to give up, and would it be worth it?
Here's my take on all this. I think they really like their prospects, and they have a lot of nice, solid major league players on the way. I don't think they have any impact bats that are going to be to the level of a Stanton. I think Yelich is a really, really, really nice player. He's one of my favorite young players in baseball. I think what they're trying to do is, at this point, just use their financial strength to acquire assets without giving up a lot. So a team like the Marlins, whose owner probably is going to sell, I'm going to be kind what I say about him.
Oh, he's a snake oil salesman. I'll say it. Go ahead.
I think somebody like him, he wants to put as much money back into his pocket right now before he sells the team. That's what I see his motivation right now. So a team like the Phillies, they're kind of sniffing around saying, hey, we can take money, give it to us, and by the way, give us some other good players with it. So I think that's how they've entered into this. That's why they talk about D. Gordon too. D. Yep. Gordon has a deal, which is, he's probably a little bit overpaid, but I don't think he's if you add a D. Gordon, I still think he's a marginal upgrade over Cesar Hernandez because he steals bases. But somebody like him, you can just say, hey, yeah, we'll take the contract, send them over here with a Stanton. Now, I think what the problem is, though, as much as Jeffrey Loria wants to dump money so he has more in his pocket before he sells the team, I see Jeffrey Loria in a situation where the buyers that are going to buy the team might be saying, "Hey, I want Stanton with this team.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to give him up. Or you know what, the new owners could say, "Hey, look, I want a fresh start. Let's see if we can wipe out this money and start over." So whoever ends up getting this deal, whichever sons of which politicians end up with the team, or which former player attached to them. When we know who the owner is, we know what their MO is, then really you can get into a situation where you can make a deal for Stanton and Yelich. Right now, I think the issue is the new ownership coming in. You don't want to kill what makes the team attractive. So Yelich, I think is more realistic of the two. And I think the Phillies would try to get Yelich by taking on D. Gordon, taking on Junichi Tozawa, who's set to make a lot of money next year, and he's only been mediocre for them this year. So, the Phillies have room in their bullpen for somebody like him, and if he can't pitch, you just cut him. So I think the Phillies are thinking outside the box. And what I want to add one thing. If I'm the Phillies right now at this trade deadline, and teams are wary of taking on payroll in any deal, I try to sneak in as a third team and say, hey, listen,
I agree.
Trade me your worst contract and give me some prospects along the way. That way, you can, Mr. Contender, you get the player you want.
Yeah.
We'll pay all the money. There are ways to be crafty along those lines. And I think I would not be shocked if the Phillies end up as a third party into a deal which really doesn't affect the club other than taking back money and taking back prospects. I mean, they took back Matt Harrison, and who was never ever going to throw a pitch for them, right? So they're willing to think along those lines.
One more before I let you go. I know last night, or it might have been the other night, that the Phillies were scouting the Yankees AAA team in Scranton. So I don't know if they were looking for some infielders here and there. But you made, with the Yankees move for Frazier and what they had to give up, in essence, to get back the relievers and Robertson, you would think maybe they were targeting Neshek, Tommy Joseph, or Hellickson in a deal, right? That could have included Robertson and Frazier. And I think that interest now is kind of diminished in Neshek and Joseph. So I go back to something you said, maybe I shouldn't quickly dismiss Joseph going to the Yankees. That's the one thing. But I'm also wondering, where does Miguel Franco fall into this? Do you believe that he is going to get moved, or do you believe that the Phillies are going to ride it out with him and just, again, I don't want to say give him the benefit of the doubt, but have a little more patience with him?
The only team right now that I could see really wants a third baseman is the Boston Red Sox. And I don't know if they're the type of organization that would give up enough prospects to get Franco. So I'm pretty sure he's here. I think his name comes up because the Phillies are willing to consider anything. But if they make if they make a trade of somebody like a Franco, I think that's a major landscape change, and you're not going to see it till the off season. The only reason I could see it happening is if Boston really feels that desperate and they throw the farm, and I don't think they're going to do that. But speaking of the Yankees, I think that's a very good landing spot for someone like Jeremy Hellickson. In fact, I heard an interview from Brian Cashman this morning on MLB Network where he said, thought out, yeah, we want a starter. So who knows? So maybe in a situation like that, if your motivation is to open up some space for Rhys Hoskins, maybe you attach Joseph in that deal. But I don't think the Phillies will get a lot back. But if there's somebody at AAA who is useful, maybe down the line. But I think that the Neshek possibility is gone. Of course, they just added 2 relievers. But that might have gotten you a little bit better of a prospect. But I think anybody they would get back from the Yankees if they do a deal would be probably like a low A guy or 2 who could make it, who might not.
And you got Milwaukee in the mix too. Milwaukee might be in the market for Neshek as well.
Yeah. Well, Neshek, I think he's going to be moved. There's enough teams that need an impact reliever. The Nationals are still looking, even though they had to do little in that. So there's so many suitors. There are a few other options out there like David Phelps, and you hear Brad Hand's name from the Padres.
San Diego. Yep.
And there's more teams that need relief help, I think. And there seems to be a glut of available relievers, but I think the Phillies have a better option for somebody because Neshek gets lefties out too.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's good value too on that investment. All right, my friend, I appreciate it as always. We will talk next week. Enjoy the games this weekend, and we're fast approaching the trade deadline. Appreciate a couple moments.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime. Have a good one.
You got it, Frank Klose.